From Olympic City and the home of Pikes Peak, this is the Automotive ADHD Show. Hello and welcome into another episode of the Automotive ADHD Podcast. I am Matt West, hanging out with you, and hopefully you've managed to sleep off some of that self-induced food coma over Thanksgiving, what with all that turkey and stuff, or at least you've kind of scraped yourself off the floor and are kind of contributing to society again. That tryptophan in the turkey, I'm telling you, that's serious stuff. But no, today is going to be a sort of a special edition of the podcast. We'll call it a holiday special, which is actually a way of saying I have a cold, which I do. I contracted some sort of respiratory infection over the holiday, and this is pretty much all I can do to talk normally right now. So instead of having me sniffle and wheeze and cough all over the microphone, I'm sure you don't want to hear that for 45 minutes. We're going to be playing a best of the show. I've hand selected some of the best segments of the show. If you missed out in the past couple of months, this is your chance to catch up on all of the good stuff. And if you really do want to hear me sniffling and coughing on a microphone for 45 minutes, if that's your thing, I don't know, we'll make that a Patreon exclusive. How about that? So without further ado, let's get into the show. So the next thing I want to talk about here is, and before we get to our guest, is speeding tickets. So check this out, right? Speeding tickets are never fun, but at some point, we all get them, whether we like it or not. Even if you think you drive slow, well, there's a good chance you'll get one at some point. Now, there's an interesting list of statistics I found from carinsurance.com. They did a study about some of the best ticket excuses and the ones that you don't want to do. And now, to clarify here, you really shouldn't be using any excuses to begin with, but these are some of the ones that they found in their course of study that have maybe a better chance of working. So now the first one, the number one is kind of boring, but it's, I didn't know I was speeding. Yeah, that has a 26% chance of success. Another one below that, needing to use the bathroom, that is 20% chance of success. Late for a date, that has a 10% chance of success, which, by the way, is the same rate that they found for using the excuse of being late to a funeral. Date, funeral, those are pretty big differences. Not a very good bet as far as that goes. Now, that said, half of the people say they got out of tickets without an excuse anyway, just being upfront, being honest, and that's sometimes the best course of action. Now, my advice, I have had, I'll say, several encounters with getting pulled over for, usually speeding. But my best advice is just be chill, be respectful, most importantly, and tell the truth, so long as it's not incriminating. If you do intend to fight the ticket, don't admit to something that you didn't actually do if you do plan to fight that ticket. But usually the best course of action, and police officers appreciate it, because at the end of the day, they're people too, and they're out there, they're not always out there looking to give people a hard time. So at the end of the day, being just respectful, chill, polite, understanding, and just being a person, that's probably your best chance of actually getting out of a small speeding ticket. Now, if you're speeding a lot, I don't know, you're probably not going to get out of it. There's a good chance you won't. Now, that said, I mean, I wouldn't know anything about that, just saying. But alpha drivers, yeah, as we were talking about that at the beginning of the show, man, they are screwed. None of this is going to work for them. If you drive an alpha and you get pulled over a lot, I'm sorry, that's just part of owning an alpha. That is what it is. Now, speaking of things that I wouldn't know anything about, and actually so, let's chat about love. Yeah, let's move on to this, because this comes from and see, I don't speak from great experience here, but how does your car affect how someone is going to perceive you, like a potential romantic partner? Well, this comes from an op-ed in the publication Inside Hook. The author Logan Mahan says she believes men are more attractive when they drive manual transmissions. Now, it's a very thorough, well-done article, but I do have some opinions. As someone who drives a manual, I would actually disagree with her on that, but more on that later. Now, her article goes on to say that, quote, I think there's something we appreciate about the simple fact that a man has gone out of his way to learn an unnecessary skill. Yeah, this is talking about if women find it attractive if men are driving manual transmission cars. An unnecessary skill. Excuse me, what's so unnecessary about it? Now, that said, she goes on, comparing the manual transmission to men wearing short shorts and backwards baseball caps, which I'm probably missing something there. I probably am. I'm not sure what she's getting at there. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe you tell me. But she also said here that the ride is bumpy, quote, and shifting gears adds a layer of unpredictability to the passenger side, whereas a passenger, you feel on edge for the majority of the ride. And she goes on to say the experience, quote, is thrilling, but also driving stick feels inherently masculine, which may add to its appeal. I just think, and my rebuttal to this is that if the drive is unpredictable and jarring and where you're feeling on edge for the majority of the ride, then whoever you're driving with may not actually be all that good at driving stick. Just a consideration there. It should be smooth. It should be controlled. It should be predictable. Smooth car handling is important. Now, that said, I'm gonna continue on here because we're gonna get to our guest. Our guest, she is waiting to join the show here in just a minute. But look, it's a huge generalization. As a car enthusiast myself, and also as not a woman, I have a very clear bias in this field here. I'm very biased, obviously, towards the manual transmission, which is clearly a superior option. I'm just throwing that out there. But that said, I'm probably the least qualified here to talk on this subject of, does a manual transmission help when perhaps you're going on a date? I don't. You know what? I am the least qualified, so that is why I want to bring a special guest on the show. She has been waiting very patiently. Laurel McKenzie, a good friend of mine for many years. Welcome to the show.
Hey, how you doing?
I am doing good. Now, to clarify, that you are not a car enthusiast.
I am not.
That you are a woman, yes.
Last time I checked.
Last time you checked, okay. And that you have definitely not been influenced by any of the monetary bribes that have been sent on behalf of the show.
Oh, no, not at all, no.
Okay. Just making sure we are good in that regard. Also, I haven't really questioned you prior to this. I don't really have a complete understanding of your position on it. So I'm going to be hearing a lot of this for the first time myself as well. But the big question is, are men who drive manual transmissions more attractive?
Well, I think the argument that can be made is that you have a skill that not many other people have. You know, that automatic transmissions have pretty much taken over the mainstream car scene, I guess. But I don't think it's going to be the number one thing that gets a girl to go home with you.
Okay. And is this presumably why I'm still single? Because I've been relying on this one tactic, just the manual transmission.
No, I think you're still single for a grab bag of reasons.
Oh, shots fired. Okay. On that note, we'll move on to the next question here. Again, Laurel McKenzie is my guest. And, okay, what do you think then when it comes to cars that says about people? Like if you were dating, and I know you're not right now, obviously you are in a relationship, but what does that say if you were actively dating someone and you were gonna get in their car? What do you think that car says about them?
Well, if you did have a manual transmission, I guess that would say to me, like, this guy took the time to learn something that's not really commonly known. And if you have an automatic, it kind of screams daddy's money.
Oh, daddy's money. Okay. So then, when looking back at the article I've been talking about here, Logan Mahan says that being in a car and being jostled around in a manual transmission car is more unpredictable and therefore more exhilarating. Do you think that is true? Because my take on that was being jostled around too badly in a car like that just is a sign of poor driver skill on behalf of the driver.
Well, I guess it depends on the person and the type of road you're running. But I personally think that, getting jostled around the car, going super fast, that's super fun to me. I'm the type of person that just likes roller coasters and going in fast cars, but I definitely know some people that would ruin your passenger seat.
Now, again, so when it comes to someone's choice of vehicles, and you do see that automatic transmission, or you do see that manual, is that immediately going to be your first kind of point of reference, or is that really like far down on the bottom of the list? Because my perspective on this, at least my initial opinion, was that no, this is honestly not that relevant. Though I mean, clearly we're talking manual transmissions are better, but that's aside from it. Is how far is that when you're waiting? If you're going on a date with someone for the first time, where is that on your priority list?
I'd say that's pretty low, actually.
Fair enough. Yeah. Now, would that, and here's a hypothetical, like a far out there, would that extend to people like you've got more and more modern cars, like even electric cars that don't have transmissions at all and are very easy to drive and drive themselves? Do you think in the future, in a world, let's picture this, in a world of like self-driving cars, do you think that just being able to drive a car in the distant future would have that same effect?
I feel like being able to drive a car would get you 2 points. I don't know how I feel about a Tesla determining where I go.
Yep. That is there's one thing we can agree upon here. So there you go. You heard it here first. Driving a manual transmission gets you roughly half a point, according to Laurel. So Laurel, I want to thank you for joining me on the show today.
Thank you.
And again, see, that is some of the perspective I wanted to bring to you, a perspective different than mine, because again, my perspective is very biased. You know what? And actually, I think that manual transmissions are very, very attractive. With all those synchros and gears, man, those transmissions, the transmissions themselves are hot. Just saying.
And now for how things work with an engineer.
Transmissions. Shift.
And that was how things work with an engineer. For more of how things work, go to patreon.com/throttlewarrior.
And we are back for the third part of the show. That car sound, by the way, courtesy of Devin. By the way, that VR6 and that Volkswagen just sounds insane. Oh my God, the pops on that. Those might as well be gunshots. Very, very cool setup, by the way. Of course, you are listening to the Automotive ADHD podcast presented by Throttle Warrior here in the beautiful shadow of Pikes Peak. The weather, again, these past couple weeks has been fantastic. Beautiful fall colors, 60 degrees during the day, a little colder at night, but hey, what can you do? I think we're getting closer to that winter, enjoying the last bit of the really proper driving season. Now, that said, if you are driving a lot, if you are enjoying the fall season of driving, you might have noticed that gas is getting more expensive. Like, I don't care where you are in the country. I could tell you here in Colorado, I've been paying about $4.20, nice, a gallon on premium, $4.20-ish. Now, low grade or just regular is still, it's still expensive compared to where it was. Granted, none of my cars can run low grade. It's times like this where I kind of wish they could, because stuff has been getting expensive. And you might have heard in the headlines, $8 a gallon in California, which is a partially true headline. That's not actually reflective on the whole state, but I'm going to get into that in just a bit. Now, the highest reported average as of August in California, the last numbers from August a couple months ago, $4.31 a gallon. And I'm going to break down some stats here. We're not going to get too number heavy, but the last highest peak, again, looking at California's numbers, because they're always a good metric of the highest gas prices in the country. And in 2008, June of 2008,
Gas peaked at $4.53 a gallon, which seems pretty close to that $4.31 a gallon they saw in August. But that's not quite true. And I'm going to kind of break this down because adjusted for inflation, that $4.53 a gallon from 2008 is actually $5.77 a gallon today. And not many places are that expensive yet. So, we're still not there yet. Not to mention, though, the bigger problem is that 27% inflation over 13 years? Yeah, that's a whole nother issue outside of cars entirely. That's something different. But, it should be accounted for there when comparing these stats. Now, going on some more numbers, the national average right now for all of the United States, according to AAA, is $3.38 a gallon, with the cheapest gas being in Oklahoma, $3.01 a gallon. Now, that said, that $8 a gallon gas station in California. And the media has been really running with that. Whoa, $8 a gallon in California. That was one gas station. Most gas stations out there are still asking, $4.30 or more, maybe even close to $4.50 for regular, which, by the way, is insane. If you are going for the premium, you are going to be starting to pay more than $5 a gallon. And good to know, all those numbers I just gave you, those are for regular, not premium. But that said, that $8 a gallon gas station it was like $7.59 for regular. That's a single gas station in the small town of Gorda, California. And that's going to be about 140 miles south of San Jose. And the owners of that gas station cited in their defense that the delivery costs and operational costs of keeping the gas station running there are why that's so high, which I'm inclined to believe them a little bit. Because the issue is they're also the only gas station for like 40 miles in any direction. They're in a really kind of rural area between San Jose and going down to like LA. So they are, they say that, I do kind of believe them, but also like if you're the only gas station in town, you end up charging whatever you want because people are going to have to pay for that lest they run out of gas halfway through or something, which I don't know. I think that's kind of dirty. But anyway, so why is this happening? Why is this happening with gas? Now, the AAA is attributing this simply to just supply and demand, which I think is only partially correct. So last year, during the height of the COVID pandemic, we saw record lows. I mean, I remember here in Colorado seeing gas for regular as low as like, it was probably like $2.10 a gallon, if not even dipping beneath the $2 a gallon mark, which was fantastic, by the way. I tanked up on all sorts of gas and it filled all my cars up, well, at least the ones that ran, I filled up. But that said, that was because, and that is partially a supply and demand thing. There was a lot less demand, a lot less travel, and a huge supply of gas that had been refined and manufactured prior to that. Now, this is where it goes deeper than that, though. It does go deeper than just supply and demand because if it was right now, gas prices are skyrocketing. If that was just because fuel manufacturers weren't keeping up, that's not true at all because we would be seeing that more pronounced across the board. But what's happening is it's the actual logistics of moving that fuel from the manufacturer to the gas station. It's part of the actual supply chain. So yeah, partially in the supply and demand sort of segment. But the issue is, and we really saw this in June and July of this year, headlines in, the South, Alabama and other places like gas stations completely out of gas, no gas sold here, hearkening back to the fuel crisis of the 1970s. And that was caused not by a shortage of the fuel itself, but by a shortage of truck drivers, long haul drivers, going across the country with these big fuel tankers distributing the fuel. That's been the issue. And that can kind of be tied into our economy as a whole right now. I mean, there's a massive portion of the public that is not working at all, for various reasons, which I won't get into those politically. But that said, there's a lot of people not working. There's a lot of people finding work elsewhere. There's a lot of people quitting jobs because of vaccine mandates and things like that. So that, again, results in more people not working, and that includes truck drivers. Now, we're seeing this, too, in the airline industry, travel industry, delivery industry, but the truck drivers specifically are what's affecting fuel costs, and that affects us directly as the car enthusiasts who probably consume a little more fuel than the average person. I mean, car people, we tend to recreationally drive instead of just driving for necessity, just going to work. We might go on drives because that's what we like to do. Now, that said, we've also got a number of extenuating political reasons for the higher gas prices on a national level, things regarding to the current administration and things like that. There's a lot of things going on that are contributing to that, which I won't get into it entirely. But one part of that is going to be things that happen politically on the state level. This is one big thing that affects our fuel costs outside of just simply saying supply and demand, and even just the logistical issues of, delivering that supply. And this is going to change state to state. And one thing I'm going to use as an example is here in Colorado, we have our governor signed a thing called Senate Bill 21-206. Right. Really creative name. Very creative name. But what that's doing is that is going to be ramping up gas. There's going to be a fee on gas between 2 to 8 cents. It's going to start at 2 cents and it's going to ramp up over a little bit of time to 8 cents a gallon, by the way. And part of this that's a little questionable is that's a fee that is what they're calling it legally, but that sure as hell sounds a lot like a tax to me. But they said, no, trust us. It's not a tax, because if it was a tax, it would have to be voted on, clearly. But anyway, that said, that also includes a fee of 27 cents on individual deliveries. So Amazon, FedEx, Grubhub, everything, whenever you order something there is going to be 27 cents more expensive. And there's also a 30-cent fee on ride sharing. Again, this is a fee, not a tax. Now, again, all right. This is a car show. I'm talking a little bit of politics here, so bear with me. But trust me, this connects to cars, connects to exactly what we do. Now, this bill here, Senate Bill 21-206, claims to implement these fees for the sake of improving, quote, transportation, which sounds nice. But what they're doing with the money, and if you read the bill, which I actually did go look at all the legalese in that bill, what they're doing is they're improving mostly like the main streets in some bigger cities like Denver, the capital, to include, more sustainable transportation options, which means bike lanes. So they're charging us more on gas to go build more bike lanes, which means we can drive less, which... all right, whatever. That said, too, it's there's another thing where it's going to a rail yard in Denver as well. So, and here's the problem, okay? And this is how this ties into everything. Even if you don't live in Colorado, every state is doing something to this effect. A lot of states are implementing different bills, different fees, different taxes. And by the way, if you are one of my listeners in Colorado, just by the way, this doesn't take effect until was it June of 2022. So we got a little less than a year until this actually takes effect. So, but again, not a thing we were allowed to vote on because it was, quote, a fee and not a tax, which I don't know. That's not getting political here, but I think that people should at least be able to vote on things like that. Now, what we've got going into this, though, is every state has some form of this. California is no exception, with having extra fees and taxes on gas. And why this is important to the automotive enthusiast, you and me, is as drivers, as consumers, we really can't do a lot about the supply chain issues and logistical problems. We can't do anything about that. There's supply and demand, but honestly, our hands are tied. We can't do much about that. But what we can do is keep an eye out for BS bills and stuff that come up in whatever respective state we live in, or, hey, you might not even be listening in the United States, but wherever you live, keep an eye out for these policy changes that happen on the local and state government sides of things, because, those directly contribute to your gas price and can contribute a good amount, 10, 15, even 20 cents, because you might have that gas tax by the state fee, quote unquote, sure. You might have that contributing to your gas price, but you might also have a city gas tax as well for a certain amount of money. And then you might also have a county one compounding on top of that. So that's how a 2 cent per gallon fee can very quickly become a 15 or 20 cent, which you notice that a lot more with a bigger tank of gas. You're going to notice 20 cents a gallon difference. Now, granted, some taxes and fees exist for legitimate reasons. I'm not going to say this one necessarily does or doesn't, but it's up to us as car enthusiasts to, keep an eye out for stuff like this that actually can impact this cool hobby that we enjoy, that is, cars and, driving. This is what we all love to do. And, being involved, you don't have to be a politically involved person at all, but, just, keeping an eye out, seeing stuff, petitions come up to axe things like this, to get rid of them. If things come up, voting. I mean, that's one of those things that if you have the opportunity to vote down something that might not benefit you and increases the tax in a way that also doesn't benefit you, especially when it comes to cars, I think that, it's something that should be done if you want to do that. Now, anyway, I mean, look at how the car community got together with the RPM Act, with the government wanting to limit use of race cars on tracks. Like the idea with that was, they wanted to ban having a race car that was once a street car. So if you bought a car and then converted it to be a race car and were racing it on a track, that would then be illegal according to the government. And so, I mean, and even though you're not driving the car on a public road, so it's not something that can be officiated by the government in the first place, but they were trying to do that. Nonetheless, the car community got together on this. They started petitions up. They got in touch with local politicians, state politicians, all of the above to put a stop to that. And, sure, little fuel things relating to gas here and there are harder to do. You're not going to get the whole car scene, backing you on a local gas tax. But at the very least, you can get with your buddies, you're going out cruising and be like, hey, guys, so they want to do this gas tax, and I think we should sign this petition that says not to do that, and then go vote not to do that. So just my 2 cents there. Now, that said, we could do that, or we could also just start distilling ethanol at home, because E85, that's the big win.
Every day, thousands go without the ability to buy necessary and life-saving parts. Parts like turbos, coilovers, and wheels.
I'm Steve, turbocharged BRZ. It doesn't run because I can play with my connecting rod through the hole in my block.
Project cars sit unfinished, waiting for parts, collecting dust.
My name is Todd, and I bought a rotary.
It's okay, bro. We'll swap it.
But no more. You, yes you, can make a difference. For as little as $5 per month, you can put an end to Project Cars suffering and support your favorite podcast. Patreon.com/Throttle Warrior. Donate now and receive special perks. Sponsored by Autoholics Anonymous and the Speed Council.
All right, and welcome back into the third half of the show. Joining me in studio right now is a good friend of mine and a longtime mechanic. His name is Brian Conrad. He has worked as a full-time mechanic going on 7 years now for a Volvo dealership day in and day out. Now, he's also started his own business tuning aftermarket ECUs, standalone ECUs, building wiring harnesses, all of the above, some really great work. And of course, one of my cars is running on a standalone ECU because of Brian. So yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, no problem, Matt.
Yeah, so what we're going to do is I've brought Brian on board because we're going to talk about mechanic myths. What are things, relating to cars, that are sometimes true, that sometimes people overhype, or just have flat out wrong? So are you ready? Are you prepared?
I hope I don't make myself sound stupid here.
No, I already do a good job of doing that to myself. So, but the first one I want to talk about, and I talked about this last week on my show, which is battery storage. And my position on the show last week was saying that it doesn't matter if you store a battery on concrete, because the old mechanic's tale, wives' tale, is that you can't do that because it's going to discharge the battery.
Yeah, funny enough, I actually had some friends just, I think like a month ago while we were working on their car, was talking about this. He's like, yeah, don't leave it on the ground though. I was like, why? Like, what's the deal? And he's like, oh, you didn't, if you leave it on the ground, it'll drain the battery. I'm like, how? How is... So, yeah, and I don't think a lot of people realize that you can't just leave a battery on a shelf or anywhere for that matter without it discharging over a long period of time. So I guess there's been a myth now that if you leave it on a hard surface, cold surface or something, that it will drain the battery, which, I mean, I guess it could be partially true because leaving batteries in the cold, as we know, like extreme colds, will reduce their capacity. But it actually draining the battery faster, like right away, that's not a thing.
So you're saying it's BS. It's not true.
It's BS.
It's BS. Yeah.
The concrete isn't going to suck the life out of your battery unless you leave it there for 2 years.
But it's not really the concrete sucking the life out of the battery.
No, it's you not charging or maintaining your batteries.
See, and I think that's one problem people have that's like widespread. People leave the battery and they just leave it there and expect it to be good in like a year's time.
Oh yeah. I charged it up last year. Yeah, last year.
Yeah.
It's a lead acid battery, one of the worst chemical batteries we have.
Yeah, that would be as opposed to, I don't know, would it be any different like talking about storage or cold storage, do you think, with like lithium ion batteries being popular now with like motorcycle batteries? You're finding a lot of those are lithium ion now.
Lithium ion batteries are a little different. I believe the requirements for those require them to be at a certain discharge before storage, actually. Like with lead acid batteries, the general consensus is it should always be charged. It should never be like left discharge or anything like that because they'll sulfate. But I'm pretty sure even in like some of our new hybrids, if they say that if you're going to leave the car in an extended period of time of storage, to actually make sure the battery is discharged all the way before storage.
Really?
Yeah, I thought that was weird.
That is, and I don't know, maybe that's how lithium ion batteries have to be stored to avoid damage or sulfating, because you can still sulfate a battery, like a lithium ion battery, right? Over time, it can like build up.
Lithium batteries don't sulfate because I don't believe they contain sulfur, but I believe they can be affected by was it memory? Oh man, I actually can't remember that one off the top of my head right now.
We'll come back to that one.
Yeah,
we'll come back to that one. Now, so moving on to the next thing here. What about when people say, another mechanic myth, that you have to turn off the AC on your car before you turn the car off? Because if you leave the AC on, when you turn the car back on, it's going to make it harder to start.
I've never heard that.
Never heard that one.
I've never heard that one.
Do you think it's true?
Hell no.
See, that's why I brought you on the show. Debunk this stuff. Yeah, it's one of those things that, I mean, I've heard a lot of people say it and be like, well, you can't, why did you turn your AC off? Oh, my car always starts slower when I leave it on.
Typically, the AC clutch is commanded either by the climate control module or the ECU in the car. So it's only allowed to activate, if it's acceptable time. I don't know if that would affect during starting, but I'm pretty sure the computer would not command the clutch to be on while a car is starting.
That would make sense. Now, do you think that stems from like old cars maybe then? Do you think that's a myth that was perpetuated by like cars of the 50s or the 60s and 70s with big honking 70s AC modules and stuff?
There are older cars that had AC systems that were so massive that they actually could stall the car out at idle, like running into like a freezing evaporator almost. But I don't know actually on that one. Maybe I'm not old enough for that.
Yeah. So a newer car then, to answer that question, would be no, doesn't matter.
Does not matter.
And maybe that is something that was passed on from generations past. I know you at one time were telling me how there was a 240 you were working on for a friend who
we
had that
were
problem.
driving it.
You were driving it.
And it actually did that thing where the pump finally overcame the torque the engine was putting out. We stalled at a light.
That's
awesome.
awesome.
Turn the air conditioning off.
Yeah, and that was an old, 1980, was it 80s or 70s
It was
Volvo?
an 85 Volvo 240.
85 Volvo 240. So still not like a computer-controlled clutch on there.
Actually, it's computer-controlled engine, but the clutch is totally analog using, I think it was a pressure switch, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. So there you go. Again, if you have a modern car, it doesn't matter if you leave the AC on or not. Does not matter. So now moving down the list here, we're going to go through these quick. How about this one? This is a really common one that even I think car people get wrong sometimes, which is driving in the cold. Like if you cold start your car, should you just go or should you give it a second to warm up? Because the arguments I've heard for it, saying that you should let it warm up, or they stem from like old carbureted cars. Like, you got to let the carburetor warm up and, let the oil warm up. But the argument I've heard even for modern cars is that, your oil's not at a, viscosity that's ideal for driving yet when it's cold.
New cars are fantastic at cold starts. with those new oil standards we have, like the 0W16, 0W20, 0W40, those cars get oiling faster. They don't have it doesn't like turn into like thick goo. Or wax. Actually, apparently, if oil gets cold enough, it starts to create wax deposits. I didn't know that. I was learning that this morning. But with these new standards and like thinner oils, cold starts are really just not a big deal anymore. I mean, personally, me, I'll let my car, if it's in the cold, I'll probably let it warm for like a minute or two, just to get the engine going, and then I'll just kind of casually drive.
Yeah.
But I think maybe on older engines, it's a bit more of a problem. Probably not trying to drive right away, but whether or not the car will start in the cold.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Starter having to work against all that friction.
Well, and like you said too, with batteries having a reduced capacity in the cold earlier as well.
Oh yeah, you're fighting a lot of things when the temperature starts to drop a lot. I mean, batteries that were already on their way out start to show their age. The oil viscosity shows itself. And of course, the technology in the car, whether or not it's carbureted or EFI'd or a newer form of direct injection, yeah, it'll definitely present itself.
Okay. So again, here you go. You heard it here, maybe first, that it doesn't matter so much, especially on newer cars. If you just get in, turn the key, and just go. In that case,
yeah, I guess it couldn't hurt just to sit there for a minute.
Like a minute, but not like people, in the past would, spend 5 or 10 minutes warming their car up before they drive. Like, well, you can't drive on it cold, or you shouldn't romp on it cold necessarily.
Yeah, but I'm guilty of that.
Yeah, you just start your car and just go and send it.
Yeah.
So this is the the thing of mechanic owned cars, mechanic special cars. You find them on Craigslist, mechanic owned. It's like, I would not touch that.
Depends on the mechanic.
Yeah. Okay. So then the next thing here, less of a mechanical question, but more of a like mechanic service industry question, which is, does it matter if you go to the dealership or a private mechanic so much? Not thinking of like really specialty cars, but.
It's a hard argument because I think I'm a bit biased in that sense because I work at the dealership,
right? And you have for almost 10 years. Basically.
And for me, it's usually if it's involving another shop, it's involving in a way where they either screwed something up or they don't have they don't have the stuff essentially to get the car or the job done, or there's something they just cannot figure out comes to the dealership. Typically, I always would say that the dealership would be a better way to go, only because at least it's going to have some sort of warranty, and it's going to be done as the factory intended. They have the most access to technical journals, like factory like tools, all that stuff. Whereas the mom and pop shop may be really good at one set of cars because they'd handle them a lot, but when you throw them into another brand or something, they're not quite sure what they're doing. And I've had that happen. We've had a couple Volvos, for example. Volvos, it's got to be Volvos, right?
Oh, yeah,
because I work on the Volvos.
That's what you work on, yeah.
A lot of our new ones, they have cam covers. They don't have valve covers. They actually have the upper caps to the main or to the cam bearings built into the cover itself, and that becomes a structural part of the engine. And some of them didn't know that. I guess we had a shop, I don't want to call any names here, but they I guess they tried to reseal it and thinking it was a valve cover, and they actually pried that sucker off with the pry bar, damaging the surface. And it's a piece that's machined to match the head,
Right, it's like line hone. You can't just swap another one on there. It's machined to fit with.
So they've gouged the surface that seals, and now it won't stop leaking oil.
Wow.
Plus, you're exposes the cams right away, and if you don't have anything holding them in, there's just a lot of things that can go wrong.
Right, and it could warp that too, right? It could warp the whole cam cover, basically.
I think usually the biggest issue with the cam covers is when they're not removed properly, because there's like a 500,000 freaking little 10mm bolts holding them in.
Right.
It's not like just a set on the outer edge. It's a lot of bolts.
Yeah.
I hate doing them, but they actually sometimes will crack in pieces coming off because they're just made of aluminum,
right?
Especially just cast aluminum. It's not very strong or anything like that. And I have actually, like on a couple of my own little projects, I have managed to break those.
Really?
Yes.
Wow. Okay. So that's one argument, I guess, for going to the dealership is that they, because a lot of people will say, oh, I take my car to the dealership only. No one else touches it, only the dealer. Whereas in the same regard, you have people who say, no, I don't trust the dealership to do a good job on anything or whatever. They want to go to a little specialty shop. And I mean, for older cars and classic cars, you do find specialty shops like Euro.
And that makes sense. You don't want to see me working on an old classic car. It might give you a heart attack when you see my belt buckle rub up against the paint.
For clarification, that's it's never happened before now.
Yeah, I don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, right.
But honestly, the only thing that I gripe about is just overall the cost that is charged now for labor and parts. I feel honestly in the automotive industry, things are getting kind of expensive more than they should be.
Really?
But I guess everyone's kind of feeling their wallet lately.
Well, and manufacturers making the cars, they're more expensive too. So, I mean, you have that to contend with as well, but then servicing them and finding parts with the chip shortage now. On the show here, a couple episodes ago, I talked about the chip shortage as well and how that's affecting manufacturers, not only in what they're having to make, but how they make them. Their actual manufacturing process and their supply chain is totally different now.
Oh, yeah. I mean, my Speeduino still hasn't shown up in the mail.
See, that's going to be a thing on a later podcast. We're going to have you back on to talk about the Speeduino, which is the affordable standalone ECU.
For the hobbyist.
For the hobbyist. You say hobbyist, but it takes some technical know-how like yours to actually get it plugged in and working and wired up. But that's a whole nother topic that's going to be great. Maybe at a later date, we'll have you on the show to talk about that. Again, my guest is Brian Conrad, a real mechanic, not an enthusiast, ghetto, backwoods mechanic like me. I don't even call myself a mechanic. I just break my stuff and have to fix it sometimes. So
I mean, I break my stuff and then I just buy another car because I don't want to fix it.
Well, in your defense, you work every 8 hours a day on cars. And see, that's one thing I don't understand is how you can work 8 hours a day and then come home with the motivation to work on your own projects after that, because you've got like 13 cars.
Oh, you don't. You just fix your friends' cars. And then they go, so where's your car? And it's over there in the corner. Not running,
engines out of it.
Transmission's not doing so great.
Yeah. All right. I got a couple more questions before we wrap the rest of the show up. And skip shifting. Here's one for you. So, like going in a manual transmission, first, third, fifth, instead of going first, second, third, fourth.
I don't know anyone that does that. Actually,
I've heard it's bad. Some people say not to do it. Like a lot of guys on forums will say, no, you're not supposed to skip shift. Whereas
I think the only thing you could do is wear the sinkers out faster, because the sinkers' job is to get them to match speed, and therefore they kind of act like a brake.
Yeah.
I guess if the input and the outputs were going at significantly different speeds, trying to go from like first to third, you might encounter an issue, but
you would have to be like redlining it in first and then going into third to do that.
I mean, to be fair though, how many broken manual gearboxes do you come across?
Depends. Is it a W-Trans?
You know what? That's a drifter problem.
That is. Yeah. They have a lot of problems. I
think at the dealership, as far as manual trans go, I think the only one I've ever seen fail was there was a Mazda tech who brought one of these cars in. It was one of the newer Miatas, and it had a blown transmission, manual trans, 6-speed. It's like, how does that happen? Well, I guess I don't know, but apparently this customer was taking it out of gear at a high speed and then trying to put pressure on the shifter to bring it into first as he comes to a stop. And when you're doing that, although he had the clutch in, the pressure was actually pushing the sinker on the shaft, and I guess it was actually spooling up the input shaft way faster than it was supposed to go. I guess probably way faster than the engine actually revs. Mm-hmm. And it was actually it was wiping out the bearings and stuff in the trans.
Really?
And it was like his third one.
Wow.
Could not get the guy to understand to stop doing that behavior.
Did they warranty it, do you know, on by the third one?
I think the third time they said no to the warranty.
Wow.
Because no one else has that problem.
Right.
With that car.
Because I will say, when you're driving a manual and you're like clutching in, and if you're going into like third, or you're coming to a stop, and if you do force it into first on most transmissions, you will still feel that resistance. Even though you've got the clutch in, you'll feel it doesn't really want to go into first.
Yeah, and that resistance is probably the sinker saying, hey, buddy, they're not matched yet.
Right. Now, you
Chill
could
out.
probably avoid that if you just rev matched into first, but it wouldn't work obviously if you're going too fast for first gear in general.
Yeah, I mean, if you're doing 60 and you're trying to put it in first, even though you have the clutch in, you're gonna have problems.
So don't do that.
Yeah, don't do that.
So don't do that. Okay, last question here. Last question comes to new cars, which you have a lot of experience with, working at a dealership, getting new cars from the factory and prepping them and taking them out to the lot. Do you have to break in a new car when you get it from the dealer? Like, do you have to drive it carefully? Some people say when you get your car, don't, go over 60 for the first 1,000 miles.
Well, I think with the new oil requirements and stuff, I mean, personally, I don't see why it's a problem.
Okay.
Because, I mean, they don't even give us instructions anymore for braking periods.
Really? Really? Just to take it and send it?
I mean, maybe it's because I don't work on exotic cars, but I mean, our Volvos don't come with instructions saying, hey, for the first 1,000 miles, make sure you're very gentle with the throttle and don't maintain the same RPM. This isn't, 1980.
Right. I have heard with some more performance cars that they do come with like a sticker on the dash saying, for first 1,000 miles, don't do that. But in general, so you're saying that that's really not something that's relevant.
No, I don't think it is. I think my Alpha had something like that in the manual.
Really?
I can't remember. I think it had something about break-in period, but
It's Italian though.
it is Italian.
Yeah.
That is bad.
Do you know and do you know if manufacturers do break in at the factory on engines or just drivetrains in general? Do they put them? Because I know sometimes they'll pull a car off the lot or the line and they'll test it, but is that a regular thing?
That I don't know. I haven't actually had a chance to go around one of the factories yet.
Not yet.
Not that lucky. But if you look at like Volkswagen's setup with their factory, it looks. I mean, I've seen it kind of on display. I think we were talking about because we were watching that Richard Hammond show.
Oh yeah, the Richard Hammond's Big, fantastic documentary series with Richard Hammond. By the way, not doing too much of cars.
Yeah,
great series. Yeah.
Yeah, but they were delivering cars to customers out of the factory, ready to drive off the lot. And I don't think they were telling them, hey, first 1,000 miles, be a little careful with your VW there.
Right.
If anything, nowadays, they're probably built ready to go right out of the factory that way.
Okay. So,
I mean, things are so much more precise now.
yeah, that's true. That is true as well. So there you go. That is some mechanic myths. I want to hear more of these, by the way. If anyone has thoughts on these, if you have thoughts on these, send them into the show, matt@throttlewarrior.com. What are some mechanic myths that we missed so I can bring Brian
I'm
back?
sure we missed plenty.
Plenty. I mean, I'm sure there's the decades of them. I mean, decades and decades of them. So, but that way I can bring Brian back onto the show, answer some of your questions as well. And of course, I want to thank Brian for joining me on this show today. And that is a wrap for the show. If you want to catch up on all things Throttle Warrior, check out throttlewarrior.com. And of course, subscribe to this podcast wherever fine podcasts and this one are downloaded. Be sure to also subscribe to notifications on the podcast. You can do that on Apple. You can do that on Spotify, all of the above. And feel free to join me next week when I assemble a team to take on Ferrari. See you then.